Number 1.
In 1987, the pair's marital problems began to escalate as Mark was allegedly physically abusive toward Christi. Rumors began in regards to his abusive tendencies, but Mark denied all accusations, claiming Christi was the instigator and any injuries she suffered were the result of him protecting himself from her. Christi was very open with her family regarding Mark's behavior and had confided that she wanted to leave her husband but wasn't sure how. She told Connie about him monitoring her phone calls, and her cousin, Deborah Fredrickson, would later reveal that Christi had shown her a bruise on her side, which she said was the result of Mark hitting her. Deborah also shared that her cousin had told her that Mark had held her up against the wall while choking her and stabbing the wall directly behind her, all while Lindsay was in the room. 10 days before her disappearance, Christi went to the emergency room for injuries allegedly caused by Mark. According to Mark, the pair had gotten into an argument after he'd asked her to stay home for the night, which resulted in Christi hitting and kicking him and burning his neck with a lit cigarette. After this, he tossed her onto their water in self-defense and she landed on her hand, injuring her thumb. The doctor on duty, Dr. Carol Shackleton, saw her and noted how scared she seemed to be of Mark, speaking low and refusing to make eye contact as he was just outside the door. This was not the first time Christi had seen Dr. Shackleton. As a result of the abuse, Christi began seeing an abuse counselor, which upset her husband. He threatened she'd never see the children again if she kept making appointments and made her promise to never go back. However, she refused to listen and continued to see the counselor. On December 9, 1987, Christi visited divorce attorney Claude Berickman at his office in Kosud, Nebraska, approximately 10 miles outside of Gothenburg. According to Christi, she was afraid of Mark finding out, hence the reason why she decided to see an out-of-town lawyer. Due to the couple's deteriorating marriage, she wanted to divorce Mark and gain full custody of the children. However, she was worried about supporting herself, as she didn't have any money of her own. Berickman noted that she seemed stressed and appeared to have been recently beaten, so the pair planned to contact the authorities and press charges against Mark for abuse. He also suggested Christi not return home and instead stay with her mother, but she refused. Before she left Berickman's office, she made a follow-up appointment, at which time they had planned to move forward with the divorce proceedings. At this point, Berickman contacted the Gothenburg Police Department to report Mark's abuse. It's believed that the then police chief, who was friends with Christi's husband, had informed Mark of her visit to the divorce lawyer. When Christi went to his parents' house, as they were babysitting the children, they refused to hand them back to their mother. Calls to the police department were of no help, as the police chief told her Mark was in his right to withhold the children and that she risked arrest if she didn't leave the property. This is reportedly one of 3 times the chief had harassed Christi that day. The first had been while she was at a local Jack and Jill convenience store, while the second occurred in the middle of the street, where he told her she needed to get her act together. Later that day, Christi made another visit to the abuse counselor. On December 10, 1987, the couple went Christmas shopping with Lindsay and Preston, a trip which also involved a visit with Santa Claus and dinner at Pizza Hut. According to Mark, he sensed a lot of anger coming from his wife. Once they completed their shopping, he and Christi left the kids with babysitter Diane Jansen and went to Pete's Place, the bar where Christi worked. Diane had babysat for the couple numerous times and was surprised to see them going out, given she knew they weren't getting along. Just after 12 a.m. on December 11, 1987, Mark and Christi left the bar and stopped at an all-night convenience store. According to Mark, the pair had a good time that night. Between 12:30 a.m. and 1 a.m., Mark came home. Diane had been doing her homework in front of the television at the time. The pair spent between 5 and 10 minutes speaking, and Mark paid her in cash. This struck Diane as odd, as Christi was normally the one to pay her for her services, and it was normally done with a check. When she was later spoken to by investigators, she would say she never saw nor heard Christi enter the house. However, Mark would claim his wife had been 5 or 6 yards ahead of him and had gone straight upstairs to see the children before heading to the main bathroom, which is why Diane hadn't seen her. At 2 a.m., Mark went to bed. This would be the last time he claims he saw Christi. The children woke Mark up at around 7 a.m. When he went to turn to Christi, he noticed she wasn't in bed, and a subsequent search of the house revealed she was gone and that a suitcase was missing. Despite being alarmed at his wife's sudden disappearance, Mark acted calm when her mother called around 9:30 a.m. that morning, saying Christi was still asleep in bed. According to Mark, he did this so as to not worry Connie. At 11:30 a.m., Mark dropped the children off at Violet's house and asked her to watch them while he looked for Christi. While he didn't directly tell her of the disappearance, he did appear shaken and had asked if Christi's grandmother had seen her. After this, he claims to have spent approximately 2 hours driving around Gothenburg looking for his wife. However, there are no witnesses to corroborate this. At 1:37 p.m., Mark filed a missing persons report with the Gothenburg Police Department. At the time of Christi's disappearance, Connie was living 100 miles away in Lodgepole, Nebraska. The Gothenburg Police Department initially handled the case but were soon joined by the Nebraska State Patrol and the Dawson County Sheriff's Office. On December 12, 1987, Mark moved out of the couple's home. A few days later, he packed up the family's belongings and sold both their cars. According to Connie, Mark forged Christi's signature on the titles in order to sell them. When he spoke with police, Mark told them that Christi had only taken a purse and suitcase with her. Curiously, he was able to tell them exactly what she'd taken with her, which struck them as odd. According to Mark, the suitcase contained a pair of jeans, a sweatshirt, a bra and a jacket, while the purse held a hairbrush, a pen, a lighter and matchbook, lipstick, a tub of Neutrogena cream, a nail file, a mirror and one piece of gum. A search of the house revealed that Christi had left behind the majority of her belongings, including diamond jewelry and her driver's license. She also never picked up her last paycheck from the bar. Toward the end of 1987, Mark took a polygraph test, but the results are said to have been inconclusive. Trace amounts of Christi's blood were found on the floor in the bedroom and in the trunk of Mark's 1977 Mercury Cougar, but there wasn't enough to indicate that she was deceased. While Mark tried to tell them it was menstrual blood, later DNA analysis would prove this statement to be false. Police believe she was seeing another man at the time of her disappearance. A note was found in her car where she'd written that she would be leaving after Christmas but had promised to contact the unnamed man within a few months. Mark was seemingly aware of this and had suggested to authorities that she'd run off with him. He was interviewed by police and has been ruled out as a suspect. Christi's disappearance received very little media attention, as police suspected she was a runaway wife as opposed to a victim of foul play. As such, her family spearheaded the search for her, distributing posters and asking people to call in with any information as to her whereabouts. They also hired a private detective named Dennis Whelan, who was given access to Christi and Mark's home, where he uncovered blood under the laundry basket in the bedroom. Despite thorough searches of the area in and around Gothenburg, no trace of Christi was found. In March 1988, Christi's suitcase and purse were located, with everything still with them, at a rest stop on I-80, near Maxwell, Nebraska. The location is approximately 30 miles from Gothenburg. Police shared that it looked like the items had been deliberately placed, as opposed to thrown from a vehicle. It appeared to them that whoever had previously had the items had wanted them to be found. Rumors began to spread about what Mark had done to Christi, including one that said he'd dismembered her, placed her body in plastic bags, and buried her at the local landfill. Townspeople also speculated that she was buried in the local railroad overpass or entombed in one of the various construction projects that were occurring at the time. In the mid-2000s, the case was one that the Nebraska State Patrol worked on with the help of a $250,000 grant. Christi's aunt, Joanne Niss, moved to Omaha, Nebraska from North Platte, Nebraska to work with Whelan. She would later become a private investigator herself in order to follow up on leads related to the case. Christi's father, Ken, says that he can't say for sure if his daughter is dead, as there's no evidence of foul play, nor any witnesses who saw anything suspicious. The case has been included in a deck of playing cards that featured photographs of unsolved homicide victims, which were distributed to prisons and jails throughout Nebraska. The hope was that it would help produce leads that could help resolve Christi's disappearance. Attempts over the years to get investigators to open a grand jury investigation have been turned down due to a lack of evidence in the case. On January 3, 2020, the case saw renewed interest after the Nebraska State Patrol released a press release. While Christi's case has since stalled, it remains open, with the patrol's cold case unit having worked on it on and off throughout the years. It's currently being investigated as a probable homicide. Christi's DNA is available for comparison should a body be found, but her dentals and fingerprints are not on file. Her family has shared their criticism over the way the investigation has been handled, saying they feel it could have been solved if police had taken it more seriously from the beginning. Currently, Mark is the only suspect in the case. However, he has never been charged. 1. The primary, and only, theory in the case, and one both investigators and Christi's family hold, is that she met with foul play, likely at the hands of Mark Nichols. This is due to Mark's behavior in the days after her disappearance, moving out of the family home, selling the family's vehicles, as well as him being able to name everything she'd supposedly taken with her. There's also his history of abuse, which is said to have been present before his marriage to Christi. Christi's family does not believe she would voluntarily leave on her own, given how much she loved her children, and Connie believes Mark beat her daughter to death before disposing of her body. The case was featured on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries, which prompted 150 calls to the show's telecenter and 15 more to the Nebraska State Patrol. However, they didn't produce anything. Connie got temporary custody of Lindsay and Preston after her daughter went missing, but a judge placed them in foster care after 4 months. They were later returned to Mark, and Connie said she hardly got to see them due to his influence. Lindsay now lives in Georgia, while Preston works in Lexington. In 1990, Mark filed for divorce on the grounds that Christi had deserted him and the kids. He currently lives in Arkansas with his third wife. Ken initially lived in Colorado after divorcing Connie, but later moved to Gothenburg after Christi's disappearance in order to be closer to the investigation. In 2013, Claude Barrickman passed away at the age of 80 years old. Christi Jo Nichols went missing from Gothenburg, Dawson County, Nebraska on December 11, 1987. She was 22 years old and is believed to have been wearing a pair of blue jeans and hiking boots. At the time of her disappearance, she stood at 5'93" and weighed approximately 120 pounds. She has brown hair and green eyes and has a scar above her left eye and on her abdomen. Her ears are pierced. Currently, the case is classified as a homicide and foul play is suspected. If alive, she would be 56 years old. Those with information regarding the case are asked to contact the North Platte office of the Nebraska State Patrol at 308-535-8047. Tips can also be called into the patrol's general number at 402-479-4049 or the Nebraska Missing Persons Information Clearinghouse at 1-877-441-5678.
Number 2.
On the evening of October 20, 2011, Laura returned home from work to find Angel had dinner waiting for her. As it was 10 p.m. and she was tired, she decided to head to bed without eating. The next morning, Laura was getting ready for work and saw Angel was still in bed. Assuming he'd be getting up soon to head to school, she left the house. However, Angel had other plans. At 10:30 a.m., Angel went to see his friend, Joel, with whom he'd had plans to dirt bike with. The pair went to Joel's uncle's house, which had a field behind it. The pair rode together for a few hours, Angel on his bike and Joel on an ATV, until the ATV ran out of gas. After the pair pushed it back to Joel's uncle's house, Angel said he was going to continue riding in East Hartford. Joel declined to go with him, citing other plans. At 1 p.m., Joel watched Angel ride off alone, heading east. At 9:30 p.m., Laura was getting ready for bed when she noticed Angel wasn't home. However, as she had to work in the morning, she went to bed, assuming he would be back at some point during the night. In the middle of the night, Laura awoke to yelling echoing in from the street below her bedroom. A voice, which sounded like Angel's, had said, "Go ahead, break it." Laura left her room in a panic and ran into Amara in the hallway, who had also been awakened by the shouting. The pair ran out to the front porch but found the street empty. When they returned inside, Laura asked Amara where Angel was, but his girlfriend didn't know, saying he hadn't been answering or returning her calls. She said she'd last spoken to him around 11 a.m. the previous morning, when he'd been out with Joel. Despite him promising to call her back later in the day, he never did, and Amara had assumed he'd had no service or that his cell phone had died. Laura ended up staying awake until 6 a.m. that morning, calling anyone she thought would know where Angel was. She was concerned, as it was unlike him to not answer his phone nor keep in touch. 12 hours later, at 6 p.m., she reported her son missing. A patrol officer responded to the house after receiving the call, where he took a missing persons report from Laura. That's when he learned about Angel spending time with Joel. Officers immediately followed up with Angel's friend, who verified that Angel had been with him during the day on October 21st, but had left to ride the trails behind a row of car dealerships in East Hartford. When asked why he hadn't joined him, Joel said he'd had errands to run and that he didn't like driving to the East Hartford area, as it meant having to drive on the highway that crosses the Connecticut River. There are 2 road bridges that span the Connecticut River, both of which contain busy highway traffic. The only other option Angel had to cross the river would be to drive over the train trestle, which many dirt bike and ATV drivers did. This led investigators to theorize that Angel may have lost control of his bike and fallen from the railroad bridge into the river, which was at flood stage at the time. However, nothing had washed ashore, and as there was no surveillance cameras on the trestle, there was no proof he'd taken this route. After learning that Angel was planning to drive along the trails behind a row of car dealerships, investigators looked at surveillance footage from said dealerships, but the footage didn't show Angel, nor his dirt bike. Toward the beginning of the investigation, police were worried that Angel had possibly injured himself while riding, meaning he was potentially stuck on one of the city's trails. This concerned them, as the nights were growing increasingly colder. Investigators were able to obtain Angel's cell phone records, which confirmed his last call was with Amara on the morning of October 21. The records also showed that the cell phone had pinged off a cell tower that same day at 3:28 p.m., more than 2 hours after Joel last saw him. This prompted a search of Joel's uncle's field and the area surrounding the cell tower. It consisted of detectives, Angel's friends and family, specialized units, patrol officers, the Marine unit and the K-9 unit. Despite an extensive search of both areas, no evidence of Angel or his bike were located. A friend of Angel's named Josh came forward to police, saying he'd last seen Angel riding his bike on the night before he disappeared. According to Josh, the pair were riding with friends in the area of Trinity College when a tan Jeep Cherokee drove by, made an abrupt U-turn, and began to chase them. Angel had turned off the road and drove into a field, so the Jeep had circled back to Josh, where the driver and occupant, 2 white men with blonde hair, asked about Angel. This information suggested to investigators that foul play could have been involved in Angel's death and prompted them to follow up on another tip from Angel's best friend. The man shared that Angel's dirt bike had actually been stolen and that he, Angel and Joel were the ones who'd stolen it. According to the friend, Angel had found the bike on Craigslist a month earlier and had recruited him and Joel to help him steal it. He'd met the sellers at their home and had asked for a test drive, during which he drove off and loaded the bike into a hidden truck. The friend had been afraid to inform the police of this, as he hadn't wanted to get in trouble. Laura found this information hard to digest, as she'd taught Angel not to steal. Investigators discovered that a bike in the East Windsor corridor had been stolen a month earlier and that the victims were a 15-year-old boy and his stepfather. Believing the pair could have possibly been the men Josh had seen in the Jeep, the 2 were questioned. They instantly recognized Angel when shown a photo of him, and their story matched that of Angel's friend. Given they've been cooperative throughout the investigation and don't match the descriptions of those in the Jeep, they have been deemed to have no connection to Angel's disappearance. Wanting to move the case along, investigators decided to take a formal statement from Joel at the police station. They found his story didn't differ from the one he'd originally told them. When they asked him to point out where Angel had gone biking on a map, they noticed it made Joel uncomfortable. When they brought this up with him, he maintained he'd had nothing to do with his friend's disappearance. To further see how he'd react under pressure, Joel was asked to take police to the railroad tracks Angel may have traveled. It was after this that he was deemed to have not had anything to do with Angel's disappearance, and police maintain he's been cooperative with the investigation. Angel's family feels Joel's story doesn't make sense, as they say Angel would never have driven the trails to East Hartford alone. There has been no activity on Angel's social media or bank accounts, nor on his cell phone. He also hasn't made contact with any friends or family. As the investigation continued, investigators learned that a tan Jeep Cherokee had recently been involved in a hit-and-run minor collision. Curious about if it was the same one that had chased Josh and Angel, they located the Jeep, unoccupied, and learned it had been stolen in a carjacking on the day the chase involving Angel had occurred. The vehicle was seized and a search warrant was obtained to search it, with forensic investigators looking for DNA, weapons and/or fingerprints. A traceable print was located in the car, which after being ran was found to belong to a Hispanic man. Even though he had a criminal record, police could find no evidence to connect him to the car chase, as he didn't match the description of the men provided by Josh. Tips continued to come into the Hartford Police Department, including one that claimed Angel had been seen riding his dirt bike with a friend named Anthony around 5 p.m., hours after he'd left Joel. This piqued investigators' interests, as they'd initially been working on the theory that Angel was last seen alive at 1 p.m. on October 21st. When they tracked Anthony down, he admitted to riding with Angel, but said it had been a day earlier, on October 20th. He said he knew it had been then, since he was with his girlfriend at 5 p.m. on October 21st. In order to corroborate his story, Anthony's girlfriend was interviewed. She said they'd been together at 5 p.m., but that they'd stayed out late into the evening, which contradicted Anthony's story, as he'd told them he'd returned home early after the pair hung out. When they confronted Anthony about the discrepancies, he admitted that he'd lied about being out late because he'd violated his court-ordered 10 p.m. curfew, which was the result of an earlier juvenile offense. He'd been afraid of getting in trouble by saying he'd been out late with his girlfriend. Investigators do not consider Anthony a person of interest in Angel's disappearance. Numerous tips have been called in that have not been deemed credible, including one that said Angel had been shot in the head and thrown into the Connecticut River, another that said his body had been burned in a dumpster, and a final one, which claimed he'd been kidnapped. On January 9, 2012, a convenience store clerk in New Britain, Connecticut, 15 miles from Hartford, called police to say Angel had visited the store. She claimed to have recognized him from a flyer and added that he had a fresh tattoo of his name on his neck. The visit had been captured on the store's surveillance camera and Laura was shocked to see how much the man on the footage looked like her son. This led police to believe the man was actually Angel. A few days later, the clerk contacted police again, claiming to have seen him once again, this time getting into a car. Despite writing down a partial license plate number, the police weren't able to locate the car or its owner, so they set up surveillance of the store. They eventually saw the man, but after they confronted him found he wasn't actually Angel, but an individual who could have passed for his double. His name was Nelson and the tattoo on his neck actually read Ashley. When questioned, he revealed he'd never heard of Angel, nor his disappearance. Over the years, there have been no new developments in the case. Investigators remain in constant contact with Angel's family, and they have his DNA, dentals and fingerprints on file, should they need them. Over the years, air and water searches had been conducted, but have turned up no leads. Angel's family is convinced there is someone out there who knows what happened to him. 1. The primary theory held by police is that Angel's disappearance is the result of an accidental drowning. They feel he likely fell into the Connecticut River while driving over the train trestle, something that would explain the lack of evidence, as well as his missing dirt bike. Given the river is too deep and dark to be searched with the use of divers or sonar, a proper search has never been possible. 2. A second theory in the case is that Angel's disappearance is the result of foul play. Some think that it's connected to the Jeep Cherokee that chased him and Josh, while others believe the people he stole the dirt bike from are somehow involved, hiring someone to retaliate on their behalf. However, given the lack of evidence in the case, it's difficult for investigators to say if Angel met with foul play. Angel's disappearance has taken a devastating toll on the family. Laura has taken it the hardest. The family teamed up with the non-profit Lost Missing to aid in their search. In August 2012, the organization planned a Shining Hope event, which called for volunteers to hang missing persons posters up across Hartford and release balloons in Angel's memory. A few months later, on the one-year anniversary of his disappearance, they held a vigil for him. On October 21, 2019, Angel's family and friends held a vigil at Colt Park, where he is believed to have last been spotted. They released balloons with his image in the hopes they'd travel far enough to grab people's attention. Angelito Garcia was last seen in the vicinity of Newfield Avenue and New Britain Avenue in Hartford, Hartford County, Connecticut on October 21, 2011. He was 19 years old and was last seen wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt, blue jeans, and black sneakers with a red design. At the time of his disappearance, he stood at 5'83" and weighed 180 pounds. He has brown eyes and brown hair, which is typically worn in braids or a ponytail, and has moles on his upper lip, upper back and chest, between his nipples. He also has scars on his right hand, across his knuckles, his chin, and on his right knee. One or both of his ears are pierced. The red Honda 85cc dirt bike Angel was riding is also missing. It features several Geico stickers on it, with the most notable being a large yellow one on the side of the bike. Currently, his case is classified as a missing persons investigation. If alive, he would be 28 years old. Those with information regarding the case are asked to contact the Hartford Police Department at either 860-757-4000, 860-757-4242 or 860-757-4236.
Number 3.
At 12 p.m. on July 6, 2004, Tammy dropped off Ashley and her little brother at the pool, located in Krug Park, in the vicinity of St. Joseph Avenue. The last time she would see her daughter was when she walked through the pool's gated entrance. According to those who were at the pool that day, Ashley was there for a few hours before borrowing a friend's cell phone and making a call. She then left the pool. While one of her friends had thought she'd left in order to go to a nearby convenience store, it's reported she was seen getting into an unknown vehicle. When Tammy returned to Krug Pool a few hours later, she found that only her son was waiting for her. When asked about Ashley's whereabouts, he said she'd left the pool of her own accord and had gotten into a friend's car. Given Ashley's history, Tammy at first believed her daughter had simply run away from home. Concerned for her well-being, she filed a police report. When she went missing, Ashley had left behind all of her personal belongings, including the medication she took to control her bipolar disorder and her 3 pet cats. Upon the police report being filed, many of Ashley's friends were contacted. Through these discussions, it was learned that Ashley had recently talked about running away. In order to bring in leads, missing persons posters featuring Ashley's image and description were put up in the area surrounding Krug Pool. Police eventually learned that Ashley hadn't planned to run away alone. Reports came in that she'd planned to head to California with 32-year-old Christopher M. Hart, who lived in her neighborhood. At the time, Hart was on parole for second-degree assault and had previously been convicted of unlawful use of a weapon, drug possession and resisting arrest. Given this, investigators were eager to locate and speak with him. 11 days after Ashley went missing, Hart was arrested in Olympia, Washington for purse snatching. While in custody, he gave authorities a fake name, which meant they were not aware he was wanted for questioning in Missouri. As such, they released him. 2 months later, on September 7, 2004, Hart was arrested again, this time for failing to make a scheduled appearance in court. At the time, he had been staying with a cousin in Olympia. It was then that police in Washington state learned his true identity and that he was wanted in Missouri. However, no sign of Ashley or the car he was believed to have been driving, a 1995 Pontiac Bonneville with Missouri license plates 377 MPY, were found, and his cousin claimed to have never seen nor heard of her. Despite their attempts, investigators were unable to get Hart to divulge any information regarding the missing girl's whereabouts. Before he was scheduled to be arraigned in court, he began to act in a way that's been described as bizarre and was sent to Western State Hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. In 2005, numerous truck drivers participated in 18 Wheels Angels, a national missing persons locator program created by Project Jason. It enlisted the help of drivers and business travelers from across the country to put up missing persons posts along their travel routes. Ashley's was one of the cases featured. That same year, Project Jason also aided in numerous other projects to help spread the word regarding her disappearance. They added her to their Adopt a Missing Person program, where a person adopts a case and shares it with those they come into contact with. They also teamed up with J.B. Scott Publishing from Anniston, Alabama, to feature Ashley in its monthly Through the Gears publication, which had a national circulation of around 150,000. In order to get the word out about Ashley's disappearance, Tammy contacted numerous other organizations. A $5,000 reward was established by the Carol Sund Carrington Memorial Reward Foundation for information leading to her location and safe return. On July 6, 2005, on the first anniversary of her disappearance, Ashley's friends and family held a candlelight vigil at Krug Pool. It featured white roses, pictures and other personal belongings. For years, Tammy spent the majority of her mornings online and on her phone, trying to locate Ashley. She now only does this every so often. Ashley was one of the missing children honored during Miles for the Missing, an annual bike ride that ensures missing youngsters are not forgotten. In June 2017, a search was organized on the north side of St. Joseph, in the area of Hintoon Road and West Highland Avenue, just east of I-229. It saw several acres of private land and properties searched with the use of specialized equipment, bloodhounds and assistance from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Police have not shared what, if anything, of interest was uncovered. The social media buzz surrounding the search prompted a new witness to come forward, Julie Walgreen. Walgreen is Hart's cousin and claims to have seen him and Ashley together on at least 2 occasions just before she went missing. She claimed the pair had discussed driving to Oregon, a trip she'd initially agreed to join them on. However, on the day Ashley went missing, she backed out, citing a bad feeling, and last saw Hart driving to Krug Pool to pick up the now missing girl. Investigators with the St. Joseph Police Department have made numerous attempts to speak with Hart regarding Ashley's disappearance, but he refuses to cooperate with the investigation. He is currently serving a 15-year sentence in the Missouri Department of Corrections for second-degree assault and tampering with a motor vehicle. Given the ongoing nature of the investigation, police have not been able to comment on specifics. While there have been no arrests in the case, they say they've investigated thousands of tips and have used Ashley's dentals and DNA to compare her with unidentified bodies found in the surrounding area. They will not say if Hart has ever been considered more than a person of interest. It's believed Ashley may still be in the local area or possibly in Kansas City, Missouri. Numerous tips have been received regarding her whereabouts, primarily from Kansas City and Olympia. While there is no evidence to show she ever arrived in Washington, it is possible she may have traveled there or to Nebraska. Tammy has shared that she does not believe her daughter would have stayed out of contact with her friends and family, nor would she willingly have stayed away for so long. While she understands that Ashley may no longer be alive, she hasn't given up hope that she'll be found and continues to circulate posters with her photo and age progression images. She remains in contact with investigators and the media. 1. The primary theory in the case is that Christopher Hart is responsible for Ashley's disappearance. As very little information of substance has been uncovered, and with Hart refusing to cooperate, all investigators and online sleuths are able to do is speculate as to what happened after Ashley got into Hart's car. While many lean toward the probability of foul play, without a body or the vehicle in question, it's difficult to say if Ashley is alive or dead. In July 2014, the St. Joseph Parks, Recreation and Civic Faculties Department and Ashley's family planted a sugar maple tree in the south parking lot of Krug Pool, an idea thought up by her grandmother. According to her family, that specific tree was chosen because its leaves turn red, Ashley's favorite color, during the fall. That same month, a candlelight vigil was held around the tree. Featuring music and prayers for her safe return, it saw her friends and family pay their respects for the missing girl. Ashley Wren Martinez was last seen at Krug Pool, located at 3541 St. Joseph Avenue, in St. Joseph, Buchanan County, Missouri on July 6, 2004. She was 15 years old and was last seen wearing blue jean shorts, a black top, a black bikini with a red cherry print under her clothing, white Reebok sneakers with red accents, and a ring with two hearts joined together. At the time of her disappearance, she stood between 5'33" and 5'53" and weighed 110 pounds. She has sandy blonde hair and blue eyes and has a scar on her left wrist. Her tongue, navel and ears are pierced. She may smoke menthol cigarettes and may occasionally drink alcohol and smoke marijuana. Currently, her case is classified as an endangered runaway. If alive, she would be 31 years old. Those with information regarding the case are asked to contact the St. Joseph Police Department at either 816-271-4777 or 816-271-4747. Tips can also be called into the Missouri State Highway Patrol at 1-800-877-3452.
Number 4.
On the night of November 19, 2012, the girls held a party at the apartment in celebration of Shakira's 19th birthday. At some point, a girl arrived and stated that she wanted to fight one of Sage's friends over a man, an altercation which ended up outside. Sage got involved and began fighting an acquaintance by the name of Jamal Smith, which led to the police being called. At around 11:20 p.m., they arrived on scene, and while Jamal filed a report against Sage, claiming she'd damaged his car, no one was arrested, and the officers soon left. Not long after this, Shakira contacted some friends in Norfolk, Virginia and asked them to pick her up and take her to the coast for a few days, something they did the next morning. According to Shakira, Sage was angry with her at the time and had felt she should have intervened in the fight on her behalf. The next morning, Sage called her father to congratulate him on the anniversary of him being released from jail. While on the call, she'd asked him for money. Sources differ on what the money was for, with some stating she wanted to get her hair braided, while others state the funds would go toward purchasing a new TV for the apartment. With Thanksgiving the next day, Sage was excited, as she would be traveling to Louisa County to surprise her stepsisters, who lived with Latasha. She was also eager to see her mother's new house. According to Latasha, Sage never responded to any of the calls or texts she sent that day. Around 5 p.m. that evening, Sage was at home, getting ready for a date. At 5:40 p.m., she woke up Aubrey, who had been sleeping in the living room, to tell her she was heading out and would be back later on that evening. However, when Aubrey woke up a few hours later, she found the apartment was dark and Sage wasn't there, with all calls made to her cell phone being sent directly to voicemail. On November 21, 2012, Aubrey awoke to find Sage still hadn't returned to the apartment. When she tried to call her cell phone, she found it kept going straight to voicemail, which struck her as odd, since Sage constantly had her phone on her and always had its charger on hand. Worried, she contacted a few friends, which is when she learned that Sage's stepsister, Kiera Morgan, had seen her the previous night around 6:30 p.m. on Main Street, near the intersection of West Main Street and 4th Street Northwest. Kiera had been walking to the bus stop when she saw Sage talking on the phone. While she was unsure who she had been speaking with, she did recall hearing her say she'd be there in 5 minutes. Aubrey then called Cookie, who felt immediately troubled and knew something wasn't right. She told Aubrey to wait until 10 p.m. that night and to report Sage as missing if she didn't return before then. The Charlottesville Police Department started their investigation into Sage's disappearance on November 22, 2012. They were immediately concerned about foul play, as they were aware of the sort of violence those who are transgender face, and thus worked to collect statements from her friends and family in the hopes of developing a timeline of her movements. According to Aubrey, the department hadn't actually taken the case as seriously as they let on, saying they'd only asked for Sage's name, birthday and picture. Dean was the one to inform Latasha that Sage was missing. She was nervous, as Sage always had her phone on her and would always respond to calls and messages from family. In order to not alarm her daughters, Ina and Rachel Angston, she stayed quiet about the news. Unfortunately, the girls soon learned of their siblings' disappearance after seeing a post about it on Facebook. In order to get a better picture of Sage's movements on the night she disappeared, investigators subpoenaed her cell phone records. As the process was slated to take a few days, so the family took matters into their own hands. They guessed Sage's account password and soon accessed the records themselves, where they learned her last known contact was with an unknown person who possessed an out-of-state number. Hoping to catch a break, Dean posted the number on Facebook and was soon contacted by a person by the name of Yami Ortiz, who claimed it belonged to a man named Eric McFadden. According to Ortiz, Sage had been dating McFadden, who was not yet openly out about his sexuality. He told Dean that he and McFadden had exchanged texts and emails and had even met on multiple occasions, and that out of the blue, he'd messaged Ortiz on November 21st and asked him to delete his contact information from his phone. Despite thinking this was a bit odd, he'd thought nothing of it until he'd seen Dean's Facebook post. Dean soon learned that Sage and McFadden had met online, most likely through one of Sage's casual encounters ads on Craigslist, and had been texting and calling each other for weeks. McFadden, who was in a relationship with a woman named Esther Aveni, had paid Sage money to keep their relationship a secret. However, it's unknown if the money exchanged was due to blackmail, prostitution, or if it is unrelated to either scenario. Ortiz provided Dean with an image of McFadden, which he then shared on Facebook. He didn't share this information with the authorities out of fear of them shutting down his own investigation into Sage's disappearance. On November 23, Ortiz connected McFadden and made him aware of the investigation. In the hopes of finding Sage, a group of officers conducted a grid search of Main Street and the surrounding area, which is heavily trafficked due to the nearby bus and train stations. They checked open lots, trash cans, fields, parking lots and dumpsters, and canvassed nearby businesses for surveillance footage. Unfortunately, those who had security cameras did not capture anything, and the only other camera was one that monitored traffic. On November 24, police conducted a search of Harris Street and around the University of Virginia. That same day, they learned about the possible connection Eric McFadden had to the investigation after Esther called them and asked that they perform a welfare check. She was out of town at the time and hadn't been able to reach him, so she'd wanted them to check he wasn't incapacitated in their apartment. When they arrived at the residence on 14th Street, they found no one was home and left. Later that day, Ortiz visited the police department and told them about McFadden, their relationship and Dean's Facebook post. When they contacted McFadden's work, they found he hadn't showed up for 3 days. Police soon went public with the information about the possible link between his and Sage's disappearances. They put up posters featuring both their images and descriptions on telephone poles, convenience store counters and community bulletin boards. With Esther's consent, investigators searched the apartment, located in downtown Charlottesville. They hoped to find any fingerprints, DNA, blood or other evidence that would show Sage had recently been at the apartment. They seized McFadden's computer and while there uncovered a receipt from a nearby CVS, which showed he'd made a purchase on November 22, only a few days prior. This was later proven by surveillance footage from the store. This led investigators to believe he may have left town after being outed by Dean on Facebook. They spoke to Aubrey about McFadden, who told them she'd only met him briefly during an encounter on Main Street with Sage. Throughout the beginning of the investigation, the family held numerous vigils to help raise awareness about the case. Eventually, investigators were given access to Sage's cell phone records, which confirmed she'd been on call with McFadden around the time she was last seen. While the records showed her phone had been off since her disappearance, it had pinged off a tower near her apartment. However, it was noted that, given Charlottesville is a small city, the cell towers are not far apart, meaning the findings weren't conclusive. The records did show that McFadden and Sage had texted numerous times throughout the night, and from that police were able to develop a more thorough timeline for the evening of November 20. 5:17 p.m. Sage sent a text asking McFadden when he was leaving. 5:20 p.m. McFadden responded, saying he had already left and was at the Hampton Inn. 5:17 p.m. to 5:40 p.m., the pair texted on and off. 5:40 p.m. Sage left her apartment and made her way to downtown Charlottesville. 6:08 p.m. McFadden texted Sage, asking where she was. 6:12 p.m. McFadden again inquired about Sage's whereabouts. 6:18 p.m. to 6:37 p.m. McFadden texted Sage numerous times, but as she was on a call with a friend, it's unsure if she saw these messages. 6:27 p.m. Upset, McFadden texted Sage again, claiming she'd stood him up. 6:35 p.m. Kiera saw Sage walking down 4th Street Northwest, near the 400 block of West Main Street. 6:40 p.m. Sage walked westbound on West Main Street. On November 25, McFadden contacted Esther and told her he was in Washington, D.C. and needed money. She informed him that the police wished to speak with him and gave him their contact information. 2 days later, he called them from New York City and explained that he hadn't left the Charlottesville area because he was involved in Sage's disappearance. During the call, he confirmed he'd had a relationship with Sage and that the pair had arranged to meet in front of the Amtrak station on Main Street, but said that she'd never appeared. Investigators in Charlottesville requested McFadden travel back to town, but he immediately hung up. Later, Esther contacted them to say her boyfriend had agreed to return so long as someone was there to pick him up from the bus station. However, an hour and a half before he was scheduled to board the bus back to Charlottesville, he emailed Esther to inform her he'd changed his mind. McFadden's strange behavior confused the family, who wondered why he wasn't cooperating with the investigation if he had nothing to hide. This led them to believe he was somehow involved. During the first week of the investigation, Cookie claims to have tried to contact investigators numerous times. It took her leaving several messages for them to return her calls. On November 28, investigators searched the streets and wooded areas along West Main Street before expanding the search to include the area around McFadden's apartment. They also held their first press conference regarding the case, where they stated it wasn't a criminal investigation, as they had no evidence to prove that anything criminal had occurred. On November 30, police visited a trash expert who helped them to determine that the garbage in the dumpster located behind McFadden's apartment was transported to a landfill 60 miles away in Henrico County, just outside Richmond, Virginia. 3 days later, Esther came to the police department after receiving an email from McFadden where he described the night Sage went missing. This provided a different sequence of events to the one he had initially shared with investigators. According to the email, he and Sage had met up on the night in questions and when walking down the street, were approached by a group of people. Claiming Sage had enemies, he wrote that he'd walked away before anything bad could happen. This suggested that McFadden had been afraid of whomever he'd seen, but as his story had changed, police were unsure if it was the truth. The email also alleged that Sage had been blackmailing McFadden and that she'd asked for money or else she'd tell Esther that she and her boyfriend were in a secret relationship. He ended it by writing that he was heading to the Midwest and he apologized for hurting her. After learning of the email, McFadden shot to the top of the suspect list. As a result, police obtained warrants to search his computer, email accounts, social media and bank accounts, but uncovered no evidence. Police searched through Sage's social media accounts, which showed no use since the night she disappeared. Through this search, they learned that many of her previous partners were not openly gay and thus had been keeping the information on the down low. According to one friend, one of the relationships had been with a man whose girlfriend had learned of his meetings with Sage after discovering emails. The man had blamed Sage and had attacked her one night while she was walking home. The assault had resulted in charges being laid. However, it was later confirmed he had no involvement in Sage's disappearance, as he had been incarcerated at the time. On December 3, the family made a public statement wherein they questioned the city's response to Sage's disappearance, saying it hadn't gotten the attention it deserved. That same day, Aubrey was discovered using Sage's food stamp card at a local convenience store. When questioned, she told investigators that the three roommates often shared their possessions and that she had taken the card in order to purchase groceries for the apartment. This led for suspicion to grow around Aubrey, as police weren't able to confirm her alibi for the night of November 20. During December 2012, three major searches occurred in relation to the case. The first was a search of the areas around Main Street and McFadden's apartment, as well as around some nearby railroad tracks, with the assistance of officers from the Virginia Department of Emergency Association and cadaver dogs from the Virginia Search and Rescue Dog Association. While one of the dogs gave a slight indication that it had picked up Sage's scent, the lead went nowhere. The second search was of a sediment pond, which was scoured by a police dive team. Unfortunately, that search turned up empty. The third search was of the landfill in Henrico County. It consisted of the Charlottesville Police Department, officers from Henrico County, personnel from the forensic and hazmat teams, 2 police dogs, and a retired special agent who had extensive knowledge of landfill searches. Despite over 12 individuals walking around the landfill, nothing of interest to the case was located. Toward the end of 2012, a reward of $10,000 was supplied by an anonymous donor in the hopes of prompting more people with information about the investigation to come forward. Frustrated and of the belief that the police department wasn't taking the case seriously, the family requested to speak with the then police chief. This meeting took 9 months to occur. While waiting for the meeting, they went public with their concerns about the lack of developments in the investigation. A new eyewitness in the case came forward in February 2013, saying they'd seen Sage at a local cafe on the night she went missing. The witness, Monica Williams, contacted police to say she'd seen Sage at the Wild Wings Cafe on Main Street around 7 p.m. on the evening of November 20, 2012. According to Monica, she was alone and waiting for someone at the bar. This information caused police to re-examine their timeline, as the cafe shares a building with the Amtrak station. This led them to look into the possibility that Sage could have had enough time to meet up with McFadden before seeing Kiera and Monica, which would mean McFadden was innocent of any wrongdoing. Unfortunately, the cafe didn't have any surveillance cameras, and when investigators spoke to the manager, they said they'd seen a group of individuals in the establishment, but were it able to confirm is one of them was Sage. In May 2013, investigators upped their efforts to locate Sage. They contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in the hopes of getting their assistance in getting word out about the case and uploaded her dental records to a national registry should her body be located. 2013 was the last time Eric contacted Esther. He'd reached out to her on and off via various emails, but given he abandoned them after one use, investigators were not able to trace his movements. The family held a vigil to mark the first anniversary of Sage's disappearance. Investigators have traveled to Tidewater twice in relation to the case. The first was regarding a reported sighting of Eric, while the second was following a report that Sage had been seen in the area. The disappearance of 18-year-old Hannah Graham from Charlottesville raised concerns for Sage's family. The search for the missing girl turned out to be the largest and most expensive in Virginia's history, and Sage's family wondered why they'd not received the same support and attention from the community. They felt there was a bias toward them, given Sage's race and sexuality. Around the second anniversary of Sage's disappearance, police once again took to the streets in order to distribute flyers to local businesses and along Main Street, with a particular focus on where she was last seen. That same month, they announced that McFadden was no longer considered a suspect in the investigation, as a more thorough look at his digital footprint didn't line up with someone who had the time to commit a criminal act that night. They also stated that he hadn't the means to harm Sage, as he didn't drive or own a car, and he lived in a heavily populated area where residents would notice something out of the ordinary. In January 2016, police got a call from Chincoteague, Virginia, some 300 miles away, of a possible sighting of Sage. However, when they arrived, it turned out to be her former roommate, Shakira. While there, they interviewed Shakira and learned that Aubrey wasn't being completely forthcoming with what she knew. Shakira also informed them that she had become unsettled about Aubrey using Sage's food stamp card and other personal belongings. Kiera was also re-interviewed, which led to further suspicion falling on Aubrey. Kiera told them that Sage and Aubrey had been in competition with each other and that Aubrey was jealous of her roommate. When approached about these allegations, Aubrey claimed it was all a misunderstanding. However, holes in her story began to emerge. It was discovered that she'd seen McFadden more than the one time she claimed, as police learned of a meeting between them and Sage the Saturday before November 20, 2012. They also felt her behavior was indicative of someone hiding something, but she continued to claim she had told them all she knew. It should be noted that police have no evidence linking Aubrey to Sage's disappearance. Police announced in March 2017 that McFadden was once again a person of interest in the case, this time more so as a witness than as a suspect. They also announced that, as of December 2016, the case had been changed to a homicide investigation. When asked why they delayed sharing this information, they cited it was out of respect for the family. In May 2018, investigators, along with a forensic unit, took another look at Sage's old apartment. The search took several days. It's unknown if anything of interest was uncovered. McFadden's mother officially reported him as a missing person with the Charlottesville Police Department in June 2019. According to his mother, she hadn't known he was missing until 2014 and had been under the impression that his father had filed a report with police. She and McFadden's stepmother are currently under the impression he may be deceased. According to investigators, they have information that states he may be in the following cities: Baltimore, Maryland; Joppatown, Maryland; Atlanta, Georgia; Lake City, South Carolina; New York City, New York; Rochester, New York; and a variety of other areas along the West Coast. They have also shared that he may have traveled south, possibly to South Carolina or Georgia. Between June and November 2019, investigators received over a dozen tips related to the case. Over the course of the investigation, people, especially Sage's family, have been critical of how police have handled it. Aubrey claims it took investigators more than 2 weeks to interview her, and people have been critical of how long it took for the Charlottesville Police Department to request help from outside agencies. There's also the fact they didn't prevent the trash from around McFadden's apartment from being collected, despite being advised to do so. While investigators have said they've spent countless hours examining evidence and reviewing witness statements, the family has repeatedly said that those involved with the case have not been open with them, nor have they kept in contact. The department's new police chief approached them regarding this claim and acknowledged that his officers had dropped the ball. A petition has been started to encourage the police department to keep heavily investigating Sage's disappearance. It asks that investigators begin to better communicate with Cookie and requests they expand the investigation beyond its focus on McFadden. It also asks that the department publicly apologize for its mishandling of the case, especially surrounding the amount of time it took for it to be designated as a criminal investigation. Finally, it requested that the media respect the pronouns Sage went by and urged for regular meetings with the family. As of May 2020, Sage's case is still being treated as a probable homicide. Investigators have teamed up with the FBI in their search for answers, and there is currently a $20,000 reward for information. 1. The primary theory in the investigation is that Eric McFadden was involved in Sage's disappearance. This is due to the inconsistencies in his story, as well as his decision to leave the Charlottesville area not long after Sage was reported missing. As aforementioned, he's considered a person of interest in the case, and investigators are looking to speak with him in order to gain a better understanding of what happened on the night of November 20, 2012. McFadden is still missing and listed as a missing person by the Charlottesville Police Department. 2. Some have shared that Aubrey may have been somehow involved in Sage's disappearance. Similar to McFadden, this is due to the inconsistencies in her version of events, as well as the fact she is said to have begun using Sage's possessions not long after she went missing. Aubrey maintains her innocence and continues to claim she's shared all she knows with investigators. 3. The final theory in the case is that Jamal Smith, the individual Sage got into a physical altercation with on November 19, 2012, may have been involved. According to investigators, he doesn't have an alibi for the night she went missing, and he's said to have been very upset about the fight and how it turned out. Unfortunately, police have not been able to properly question him, as he's nowhere to be found. For several months after Sage disappeared, Cookie would get numerous calls from a blocked number between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. a couple of nights a week. However, when she would answer, there would be no one on the other end. The calls stopped when Cookie lost her phone and had to get a new number. Dean has shared that he's filled with regret with how he treated Sage after coming out. He wishes he could have acted differently and not lost that time with his child. Since Sage's disappearance, Cookie has become seriously ill. She was diagnosed with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and has undergone triple bypass surgery. Sage's stepsister, Ina, wishes Sage could have been around to see the milestones she's hit since her disappearance, including graduating from high school and getting her driver's license. The Q Center for Missing Persons had a bench made up in Sage's honor. As well, the Remember Tour recently made a stop in Charlottesville and Sage was amongst those honored. The family hopes that Sage's disappearance leads to cases involving transgender youth being treated differently in the future. Sage Smith went missing from the 500 block of West Main Street in downtown Charlottesville, Virginia on November 20, 2012. She was 19 years old and was last seen wearing a black jacket, dark gray sweatpants, a black scarf, and gray and black rain boots with pink and purple lining. She may have also been wearing a bleached hooded sweatshirt. At the time of her disappearance, she stood between 5'83" and 5'11" and weighed 130 pounds. She has black hair, which is usually worn in braids, and brown eyes, and was known to wear women's clothes and wigs. Her ears and eyebrow are pierced currently. Her case is classified as endangered missing. If alive, she would be 29 years old. Eric McFadden was last seen in Charlottesville, Virginia on November 23, 2012. He was 21 years old. At the time of his disappearance, he stood between 5'10" and 6'13" and weighed approximately 180 to 190 pounds. He has black hair and brown eyes. Currently, his case is classified as endangered missing. If alive, he would be either 28 or 29 years old. Those with information regarding the case are asked to contact the Charlottesville Police Department at 434-970-3280. Tips can also be called into Crime Stoppers at 434-977-4000 or the Family Tip Line at 434-970-3381.
Number 5.
During the early hours of May 1, 2017, Desiree and her sister were picked up from their home in Liberty, Missouri by a man by the name of Robert Jason Keegan. The trio spent the majority of the day together, visiting 3 different locations, including abandoned houses known for drug activity. At around 4:30 p.m., Keegan dropped the girls off at a McDonald's at 31st Street and Van Brunt Boulevard in Kansas City, Missouri. From there, a man named Mark Arzola, who was known for being in and out of prison, picked the pair up and drove them to another McDonald's location along Route 291 in Liberty. From here, the stories begin to differ. While some accounts state that Desiree's sister was dropped off at the family home, others say she got out of the car at the McDonald's while Desiree and Arzola drove away. According to reports, Arzola and/or Keegan were supposed to drop Desiree off at a friend's house, but she never arrived. She instead went to Arzola's house, located in the Marlboro neighborhood of Kansas City, an area known for drug activity and for being high risk. At around 1 a.m. on May 2, Desiree texted her sister to inform her she was on her way home. About an hour later, she made a phone call to an unknown person, someone she would later text a few hours later. Before that text, at 3 a.m., Desiree last accessed her Facebook account via her cell phone. At first, her mother says it didn't really sink in that anything was amiss until the next night when she took a look at her Verizon account, which Desiree's phone was under, and saw all activity from her daughter had ceased the morning of May 2. This was unusual, as she was in constant contact with her loved ones. With her concern growing, Patty attempted to contact her daughter but found all her calls went directly to voicemail. As such, After 3 days, she officially reported Desirea as missing to authorities. Patty believes Desirea and her sister were planning a surprise birthday party for her on the day her daughter went missing. Desirea had left a birthday card on her pillow, and the girls had purchased ingredients to bake a cake. Despite knowing of the men who Desirea is reported to have been with and warning her daughter about them, Patty had never actually met Robert Keegan or Mark Arzola in person. Despite their friendship, she was not involved in drugs, and her family doesn't believe she died of a possible overdose, which has been suggested by some with knowledge of the case. Throughout the early stages of the investigation, the family was in daily contact with the authorities. They would also team up with volunteers to distribute flyers across Kansas City. Throughout May 2017, numerous searches were conducted. One such search included the wooded area around Blue River Road and Bannister Road after an employee at the Phillips 66 gas station at Bannister Road and Holmes Road said she'd seen Desirea on the night of May 2. According to the employee, she'd bought alcohol and was in the company of a man. Cell phone pings would also result in searches of the areas around Grandview Road and Trolley Trail, along with 3 abandoned houses located at 83rd Street and Hillcrest Road, 93rd Street and Grandview Road, and Oakley Avenue and East 27th Terrace. However, no evidence was uncovered. In June 2017, another search was conducted, this time along a 2 to 3 mile stretch of the southwest area of Swope Park, after numerous tips were called in by potential witnesses who claimed to have seen her in the area. Despite roughly 80 people being involved, including friends, family and volunteers from out-of-state organizations, no sign of Desirea could be found. Since her disappearance, all activity has ceased on Desirea's social media accounts. To try and gain some leads in the case, investigators interviewed the group of friends the missing girl was with on the night she went missing. One such person was Mark Arzola, who claimed the two of them drove to his house at 8111 Highland Avenue in South Kansas City after dropping off Desirea's sister. According to Arzola, they were together until around 1:30 a.m. on May 2, after which he left in a white pickup truck, whose driver he couldn't see. After this, the pair texted until around 2:35 a.m., where they discussed clothes Desirea had left at his house. According to investigators, there are numerous discrepancies in Arzola's story. The first is that he told Desirea's stepmother, Jennifer Ferris, that he and Desirea had gone to the soccer field off Blue River Road before driving to his house. This is also supported by Patty, who claims Arzola told her that he and Desirea sat in his car in a parking lot for a while before going to Highland Avenue. The second inconsistency surrounds the time frame Desirea left the residence, with police believing she'd actually left before midnight and not around 1:30 a.m. like Arzola claims. Police also spoke with Keegan after he and 5 other people were arrested in a separate investigation into a meth and weapons conspiracy just days after Desirea went missing. Facing 18 years in federal prison on the charges, he told investigators that he had picked Desirea up from Arzola's house in his Ford F-150 and dropped her off at 73rd Street and Troost Avenue. Court records would reveal more aspects of his story, with text messages between the two showing he had actually been the one to drop her off in the Marlboro neighborhood on May 1, not Arzola. According to investigators, the pair exchanged 23 texts that night between 10:20 p.m. and 10:58 p.m., and Facebook messages would later show she'd told him she wanted to go home. Hoping to uncover a more thorough timeline, Jennifer emailed the detective in charge of the investigation and asked for Desirea's phone records, from which the family was able to make a map of her movements on May 1 and 2. While some pings are believed to be missing, the timeline is as follows. May 1, 2017. 4 a.m. her cell phone pings at her home in Liberty, Missouri. 4 p.m. her cell phone pings near East 27th Street and Cleveland Avenue in Kansas City, Missouri. 4:30 p.m. her cell phone pings near East 30th Terrace and Van Brunt Boulevard. 5:25 p.m. her cell phone pings once again in the area near the family home in Liberty. 5:46 p.m. her cell phone pings near 700 North Church Road in Liberty. Between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. her cell phone pings in the area of Holmes Road and I-435. 9 p.m. her cell phone pings near the Oakwood neighborhood, just off I-71 in South Kansas City. 10:45 p.m. Her cell phone pings near West 124th Street and Warnell Road in South Kansas City. May 2, 2017. Between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. her cell phone pings near East 75th Street and Prospect Avenue. Between 3 a.m. and 3:14 a.m. her cell phone pings near East 43rd Street South and Washington Avenue in Independence, Missouri. 4 a.m. her cell phone pings near East 83rd Street and Hillcrest Road in Kansas City. Her family believes those connected to the drug house on East 83rd Street and Hillcrest Road harmed Desirea. In August 2017, they visited the neighborhood, but no one came to the door when they approached the house. In July 2017, the status of Desirea's case was changed to endangered, which happens when investigators suspect her physical safety is in jeopardy. To help bring about leads in the case, her family offered a $200 reward per month for up to 1 year to anyone with information regarding Desirea's location. To honor the missing girl, her family held a balloon release and prayer vigil at the family home in Kearney in November 2017. They would repeat this ceremony in May 2019, on the second anniversary of Desirea's disappearance. In January 2018, investigators obtained access to 5 files from Desirea's online accounts. However, given the nature of the investigation, they have been unable to share what was uncovered. To help raise money for continued searches, the family has held numerous fundraisers, which include bingo, silent auctions and raffles. They've also held a spaghetti dinner, with the plan of purchasing more resources for those helping to search for Desirea. As the case drew on, the family formed Desirea's Army, a group of supporters dedicated to conducting searches and investigating potential leads. Through their independent investigation, they uncovered a vast web of drugs and crime within Kansas City. They were also able to track down those who say they know what happened to the missing girl. In February 2018, investigators filed a search warrant wherein they asked for access to her phone and email accounts. Similar to the previous search of her online files, they would not reveal what they uncovered. There have been several reported sightings of Desirea outside of Kansas City and in locations out of state. However, none have been confirmed. In March 2018, several digital billboards were put up around Kansas City, featuring Desirea's face and information, in the hopes of generating new leads. That same month, volunteers used drones to scour the metro area of the city for any signs of the missing girl, based on tips that had been called in. However, they came up empty. A memorial walk was held for Desirea at Center Elementary School in April 2018. A month later, the family held a candlelight vigil at 85th Street and Brooklyn Avenue. Her family has shared that an eyewitness saw Desirea's body in the front passenger seat of the white pickup truck while it was in the driveway of the house on Highland Avenue. While the witness wasn't aware of how she'd died, another story states her body was then placed in a barrel and covered in concrete before being dumped in a nearby water source. This version of events has not been verified by the authorities, and an underwater search by members of Desirea's Army came up empty. Desirea's family feels great anxiety whenever human remains are found in the area. While her mother finds herself hoping they belong to her daughter so that she can bring her home, she has shared her heart sinks at the news of the discovery of an unidentified body. In August 2018, Patty received a text from an unknown person saying Desirea had been kidnapped and forced into child sex trafficking. The message told her that her daughter would only be returned home if she paid a ransom of $2,000, made up of money and Apple gift cards, that was to be sent to an address in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Despite being told to not contact the authorities, as the sender threatened Desirea's life if such contact was made, Patty informed the family's private investigator, who found out the text was a scam. While the phone number had a Connecticut area code, the IP address traced back to India. In September 2018, the family held a vigil at the Jackson County Courthouse in an attempt to demand accountability from those working there. It not only honored Desirea, but those who were missing or died under suspicious circumstances and those whose killers had not yet been brought to justice, and many families were in attendance. A similar ceremony was held 2 months later, with said families asking for help, communication, and acknowledgement of the injustices they've faced. A month later, volunteers with the Big Search KC canvassed Kansas City in order to raise awareness for those missing in the area. The search would occur again in October 2019, and volunteers visited numerous businesses while handing out information booklets. The Big Search is a national search effort organized by FREE International and ClassKids, non-profits dedicated to locating missing children and ending human trafficking, and searches occur throughout the United States each year. Investigators have shared that there are people who are currently incarcerated for federal offenses who know more than they're saying, but they're unable to name them due to the ongoing nature of the investigation. As many have invoked their Miranda rights, they most likely have not disclosed all they know. In January 2020, the family set up their one-tip line, where people could anonymously call in tips, which would then be forwarded to law enforcement. That same month, they announced that they'd pinpointed one of Desirea's last cell phone pings near a cell tower located by I-70 and Nolan Road in Independence, Missouri at 3:14 a.m. on May 2, 2017. They were also able to confirm that an unnamed person's cell phone pinged in the same area until Desirea's phone was shut off, leading the family and investigators to believe said individual was one of the last people to see the missing girl. Investigators have shared that one of the biggest challenges in the case is that the Liberty Police Department is located on the northeast side of Kansas City, while the case is being investigated in the city's south end, outside of their jurisdiction. Despite these hurdles, they've received assistance from the Kansas City Police Department, federal law enforcement and other area law enforcement agencies, and have helped to coordinate a flow of communication with them and the family. Tips continue to be called in and the case remains active. It's said that hundreds of leads have been investigated and that hundreds of people have been interviewed, resulting in a narrow list of potential persons of interest. However, no one has been arrested in connection to the case. There's currently a $12,500 reward available in relation to the case, an amount that has been increased from $10,000 and $4,000 over the years. Desirea's family continues to search for her, retrace her steps and investigate tips. While they hold out hope they'll find her, it's their assumption that she's currently deceased. Despite feeling as if the case has taken a backseat for investigators, they remain in constant contact with police. 1. A primary theory in the case is that Desiree is currently deceased and that Robert Keegan and/or Mark Arzola were involved. This is corroborated by the potential eyewitness sighting of Desiree's body in the front seat of Keegan's pickup truck and is suggested through the inconsistencies in both his and Arzola's accounts, as well as by the area where she was last seen. However, as Desiree's body has never been located and little evidence has been uncovered, it's hard to say for certain if the pair were involved. 2. A theory that has since been shot down is that Desiree ran away from home. Those investigating the case don't believe she did this, as it is out of character for her to be out of contact with her family for such a long period of time. As well, the leads that have been uncovered don't indicate she ran away by herself or with someone else. 3. A final theory posited in the case states that Desiree was sold into the sex trade. While there hasn't been any evidence uncovered to support this theory, it's one that has been suggested by web sleuths and those conducting their own analysis of the investigation. In order to raise awareness about the case, Desiree's family has created 2 Facebook pages. The first is called Missing Desirea Ferris, which solely focuses on the young girl's disappearance, while the second is Desi's Voice, Speaking for Those Who Can't, which aims to raise awareness about other missing persons cases. The members of Desi's Voice helped raise $1,550 to help pay for a headstone for Marco Green, a 28-year-old man who was murdered in October 2017. Desirea's disappearance has been broadcast nationwide, with appearances on Crime Watch Daily, The Missing and the Maury Show, as well as in a feature for People magazine. Patty shares that she spends a lot of time in Desirea's room, as it allows her to feel close to her daughter. It has remained the same as on the day she disappeared. Desirea's family has made the porch light of their home pink, the missing girl's favorite color, as a symbol of hope that she'll one day return home. Patty no longer celebrates her birthday, as it's a reminder of the last time she saw her daughter. Desiree Desi Ann Ferris went missing from Liberty, Clay County, Missouri on May 2, 2017. She was 18 years old and was last seen wearing a white or cream-colored crop top, a fuzzy pink jacket, and sweatpants. She was carrying a tan purse. At the time of her disappearance, she stood at 5'13" and weighed approximately 95 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes. She has a birthmark on her abdomen, near her navel, and a 1 1/23 scar on her left arm. Currently, her case is classified as endangered missing. If alive, she would be 21 years old. Those with information regarding the case are asked to contact the Liberty Police Department at 816-439-4701 or the family's tip line at 816-945-2722. Tips can also be called in to the Missouri State Highway Patrol at 573-526-6178 or Crime Stoppers at 816-474-8477.
Number 6.
The day of April 25, 1988 started out like any other. Elizabeth had attended classes at Central Texas College before heading to her job at the 7-Eleven on Rancier Avenue in Killeen, Texas, by the east gate of Fort Hood Army Base. After her shift, Elizabeth made her way to her boyfriend Ricky Ray's home for a study session, approximately 30 miles from her parents' house in Lampasas. The pair were studying for the last of their exams when they got into an argument. Elizabeth asked for Ricky to take her home, but he refused. As such, she left the house on foot between 9:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. Elizabeth's decision to walk home meant she would have had to head down Highway 190, which was dark at the time and features long stretches of desolate road. About an hour or so later, a clerk at another 7-Eleven located along Highway 190 in Caperas Cove reported seeing a Central Texas College student driving a green Gremlin drop Elizabeth off outside the store, approximately 17 miles from her home. She entered the store and asked to use their phone, which they allowed, and she called Ricky. The pair got into another argument over Elizabeth leaving the house without informing Ricky and she hung up. She then decided to call her brother, but as the call was long distance she decided to use the payphone located outside the store. Sam Soon is said to have been awakened by the house's telephone ringing in the dining room a little after midnight, but it stopped ringing by the time she'd made it downstairs. Elizabeth has not been seen or heard from since. As a family rule, the last person to return home was to turn off the porch light. Assuming Elizabeth had returned and simply forgotten to do so, her brother, Tom, turned it off for her on the night of April 25. On the morning of April 26, Sam Soon asked her 2-year-old granddaughter to check on Elizabeth, but the young girl said she wasn't in her room. Concerned, she asked her daughter, Barbara, to call Ricky and see if Elizabeth was over at his house. When pressed, Ricky told Barbara that she'd gone to her sister's residence at the Central Texas College housing complex. However, when Barbara and Sam Soon drove to the complex, they found Elizabeth was not there. Right away, her parents knew something was wrong, as it was out of character for her to not tell them where she was when she wasn't home. Immediately, the Campbell family attempted to report Elizabeth as missing, but the numerous police stations they went to told them they would have to wait until she had been missing for 72 hours, as she was an adult. Not wanting to wait, her parents and friends decided to conduct their own search until they were allowed to file a report. Tom and Sam soon went to the Central Texas College campus and were able to locate the man who had dropped Elizabeth off at the 7-Eleven in Caperas Cove. He said he'd been working late at the college's computer lab and when he was leaving around 10:48 p.m. had seen Elizabeth walking alone down the service road near the college. Recognizing her as a fellow student, he drove up to her and offered her a ride, which she accepted. According to the student, it was Elizabeth's request that she be dropped off at the 7-Eleven store and he obliged. The time had been around 11 p.m. Upon the police getting involved, Ricky was cleared as a suspect. Investigators believe it's likely that someone gave her a ride from Killeen to the spot near Central Texas College, approximately 6 miles from Ricky's house, from which she was picked up by the male student. However, no one has come forward to say they did this. 6 days after she was reported missing, a girl matching Elizabeth's description was spotted by a convenience store clerk near Waco, Texas, 85 miles from where she disappeared. The possible sighting was discovered when Sam soon entered the store a few weeks later to put up a missing persons poster in the window. Upon seeing the poster and another photo of Elizabeth, he was sure his sighting was positive. According to the clerk, he'd seen a car drive up to the station. A man exited the vehicle and pulled out a young woman by her arm, bringing her into the store with him. Once in the store, he used his free hand to pay the clerk $20 from a roll of bills, careful to not loosen his grip upon the woman's arm. At some point during the interaction, the young woman looked up at the clerk and he acknowledged her. This caused the man to speak to her in another language, after which she dropped her head. The pair left soon after. Not long after learning of this potential sighting, Sam soon learnt of yet another 2 miles from where Elizabeth was last seen. According to another store clerk, Elizabeth was spotted 2 weeks after she'd vanished with a rough and mean-looking Asian man. Like in the previous sighting, the man was holding her arm, and it looked as if she wasn't with him by choice. The pair purchased ice cream, and during the entire interaction she only looked up once before lowering her head again. Despite the 2 potential sightings, investigators weren't convinced the young woman seen with the man was indeed Elizabeth. This goes against a belief of others, who presume the man seen with the woman during the second sighting is the one she was seen with during the first. Even though they were skeptical, a sketch of the man was released, along with a description, which stated he was between 25 and 30 years of age, stood at 5'73" and weighed 160 pounds. He is said to have acne scars on his face and plucked eyebrows, and both times was seen wearing a silver martial arts medallion on a gold chain. The man has never been identified. Hoping to find any trace of her daughter, Sam soon searched the site of Highway 190, where she came upon a bone. When sent in for testing, it was determined to have belonged to a deer. During the initial phases of the search, a reward was issued for any information that could lead to Elizabeth's return. On July 10, 1988, a gas station customer in Garland, Texas, claimed to have seen Elizabeth. According to her story, she was entering the station to pay for gas when she bumped into a girl resembling Elizabeth at the door. The young woman was acting frightened. When she saw a photo of Elizabeth, she was certain the girl was her, as she'd had a tooth that overlapped on the right-hand side when she smiled, just like the missing girl. The Campbells have written hundreds of letters to law enforcement agencies throughout Texas and have attempted to get media coverage of the case wherever they can. In 1992, Elizabeth's purse was discovered in the evidence room at the Crockett County Sheriff's Department when employees were cleaning. It was learned that it belonged to a missing person upon Elizabeth's ID being ran through the system. While there was no record of who had turned it in or when, it's said to have been located just off I-10 in Azona, Texas, over 180 miles from where she was last seen. It was in good condition, and while there was no physical evidence relating to her disappearance present, it said her social security card, military ID and credit card were all present. The only items missing were her lipstick, hairbrush and keys. Investigators are hoping someone will remember turning in the purse, which is believed to have arrived at the sheriff's department between April 1988 and January 1989. Elizabeth's family has followed leads across Texas and out of state. They've spent the majority of their money on trying to search for her, including selling cars, cattle, 3 houses and anything they could, with much of the funds being spent on the printing and distribution of flyers, phone bills and postage for letters. They followed up on every unidentified body found in Texas and have had them examined to see if they were Elizabeth. They've also turned to religion, approaching churches of all denominations and asking them to pray for their missing loved one, and frequently post about the case on online forums. Elizabeth's case remains one of Capara's Cove's oldest cold cases. As the years have gone on, tips are called in less frequently, and police have begun to consider the possibility she's dead. As such, her DNA and dentals are on file and available for comparison. Despite what investigators say, the family remains hopeful they'll be able to bring her home. 1. Based on 2 of the reported sightings, her family feels Elizabeth is still alive and was forced into sex work. This theory is also brought up in an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. Given the young woman seen looked to be controlled by the man she was with, it's thought he might be her pimp. As such, it's believed she may have been taken to either Mexico or California, where she worked as a prostitute. 2. The theory held by investigators is that Elizabeth was abducted and murdered on the night she went missing. There are many facets to this theory, with some feeling she may have set off on foot from the 7-Eleven after not being able to reach her brother and was picked up by someone with ill intentions, and others saying she may have been a victim of what have been called the Texas killing fields and the highway to hell. However, as Elizabeth's body nor evidence of foul play have been found, it's hard to say if this theory is the correct one. 3. Online sleuths have posited that the Central Texas college student who drove her to the 7-Eleven in Caperas Cove may have been responsible for her disappearance. Those who follow this line of thought believe he may have waited outside the store to see if she needed a ride elsewhere, after which something nefarious occurred. While it's unknown if he's been cleared of involvement by investigators, it's assumed he has been, and, as such, this theory is seen as unlikely. 4. The final theory in the case is that Elizabeth was a victim of Robert Ben Rhodes, also known as the truck stop killer. Rhodes worked as a truck driver and is said to have killed women along his routes between 1975 and 1990. One of his victims was found off I-10 in Arizona, the same town Elizabeth's purse was located. Despite Elizabeth having gone missing during the time Rhodes was active, no law enforcement agency has tied him to her disappearance. In 1993, the family moved from Lampasas to Killeen. Elizabeth's case has been featured on The Young and the Restless, America's Most Wanted and Unsolved Mysteries. Despite numerous people calling into Unsolved Mysteries and AMW, none of the tips panned out. Tom Campbell passed away on June 16, 2018. In his obituary, Elizabeth is listed as one of his surviving relatives. Sam Soon has kept her daughter's possessions. She is said to be elderly and in poor health. Elizabeth Ann Campbell went missing from Caperas Cove, Creel County, Texas on April 25, 1988. She was 20 years old and was last seen wearing a white t-shirt with a design imprinted on the front, blue jeans, white tennis shoes, a Wittnauer diamond romance watch, and a 10-carat ring with 3 embedded sapphires in the center surrounded by diamonds. She was also carrying a faded yellow jacket, college textbooks and papers, her 7-Eleven smock and name tag, and a maroon purse. At the time of her disappearance, she stood at 5'23" and weighed between 96 and 106 pounds. She has long, dark brown hair and brown eyes, and her ears are double pierced. She has the following scars: a 13 horizontal scar under her chin, a 13 horizontal scar on her forehead, near her hairline, a scar on her elbow, and a small scar on the inside of her right eyebrow. She also has a small birthmark on her right buttock and a small mole in the center of her back, between her shoulder blades. When she went missing, she was known to smoke Virginia Slims and Capri cigarettes. She is allergic to cola beverages and is said to sometimes have problems with her sinuses. While she wears glasses and contact lenses for distance vision, her contacts had been left at home on the day she disappeared. Currently, her case is classified as endangered missing, with foul play suspected. If alive, she would be 52 years old. Those with information regarding the case are asked to contact the Caperas Cove Police Department at either 817-547-4273, 254-547-1357 or 254-547-8222. Tips can also be called in anonymously to the Texas Missing Persons Clearinghouse at 1-800-346-3243.
Number 7.
On the evening of December 22, 2018, Matthew was heading home after hanging out with a co-worker in Lacey, Washington. As his cell phone was out of battery and he didn't have a method of transportation to get home, he decided to walk. While going down Sleater-Kinney Road, he noticed a group of individuals across the street, from which 3 people in hooded sweatshirts began to approach and follow him. Concerned, Matthew decided to enter the nearby Rite Aid store at 7th Avenue Southeast and Sleater-Kinney Road SE to see if they would continue on. However, when he exited the store an hour later, he found them sitting out front. Believing he was simply being paranoid, Matthew continued on home. Once he'd reached the back roads, he tripped on his work boots and was jumped by the trio following him. According to his account of the assault, the three of them began to beat and cut him. They slashed his body with a knife and carved the word "kill" into his chest. While the assault was happening, Matthew screamed out for help and found himself coming in and out of consciousness. Matthew managed to make his way home after the three individuals fled. At some point in the night, he recorded a video of himself crying while covered in blood. He posted it to his social media, where it was noticed by his older brother, who tried frantically to get a hold of the then 20-year-old. Matthew took down the video upon waking up the next morning. Traumatized by what had happened to him the night before, Matthew made his way to his mother's house on the morning of December 23. Sarah was alarmed by what had happened to her son and urged him to visit the hospital and report the incident to the police, both things Matthew refused to do because he was worried about putting his family in danger. When asked if he knew the three individuals who attacked him, he claimed not to, but stated he hadn't owed anyone any money when pressed further. When Matthew later recounted the incident to his friends, he refused to mention any names or reveal why anyone would want to harm him, simply stating he knew that people were out to get him. Outside of the assault in December 2018, Matthew was experiencing stress as a result of his financial situation. In order to pay his bills, his mother suggested he focus on finding a job, something he eventually did. Fast forward to February 28, 2019, Matthew and his sister spent the day bowling. Between 4 p.m. and 4:30 p.m., they returned to the family home, where they planned to spend the rest of the day watching movies. The pair were in his sister's room, which is located off the garage, away from the main house. Before starting the first movie, between 5:05 p.m. and 5:10 p.m., Matthew told his sister he needed to grab his cell phone, which he'd left in the house. He never returned to the room. At around 5:27 p.m. on February 28, 2019, police deputies responded to the 17,800 block of Old Highway 99 SW in Thurston County, Washington after Matthew's neighbor called 911 to report his acting erratically. She relayed to dispatch that he'd been ranting about his family's death and claiming that unknown individuals were after him. She and others who contacted the authorities said he appeared to have been in the midst of a mental breakdown. After the interaction with his neighbor, he is reported to have hopped a nearby fence and run into the road, causing several vehicles to swerve and stop in order to avoid him. At this time, he jumped onto a car and into the bed of a pickup truck before running away. At around 5:30 p.m., Matthew entered the Speedway grocery store located in the 19,200 block of Old Highway SW, approximately 2 miles from his parents' home. According to the clerk who was working at the time, he appeared panicked and sweaty, with dried blood around his mouth, and continued to say his entire family had been murdered. While he was looking for a place to hide, the clerk called 911, prompting him to run out of the store. The time was around 6:30 p.m., and it was the last time he was seen or heard from. The first thing deputies did was contact the Anfeldt family, who were alive and well. When pressed regarding Matthew's strange and erratic behavior, they didn't have an answer. According to his family, he'd never done something like this before and hadn't gone more than 24 hours without speaking with his mother. They did share that he hadn't been dressed for the cold temperatures the area was experiencing at the time, and as he didn't have his cell phone or wallet with him, he had no means of supporting himself. It was initially believed by investigators that it was possible someone had picked Matthew up in an attempt to help him, but no one in the community had come forward. The missing man also didn't show up at any of the hospitals located in Thurston County or nearby Lewis County, which led them to feel this theory unlikely. In the hopes of finding information, forensic experts examined Matthew's cell phone to see if he'd had any pertinent conversations in the lead-up of his disappearance. Investigators also put out a call to the public, and his mother posted flyers, but after numerous tips were called in, they were no closer to finding him. Throughout March 2019, numerous searches were conducted with the use of drones and the local K9 unit. A map of the area where Matthew was last seen was also released, with police asking residents to search their outbuildings and crawl spaces, as well as wooded areas and tall grass. If they didn't feel comfortable searching themselves, they were asked to allow deputies to do so. 2 months into the investigation, the Anfeldt family set up a GoFundMe page to raise money for a reward fund and to help cover expenses, including the hiring of a private investigator. Sarah shared that any leftover money would be donated to another family struggling with finding a missing loved one. When police learned about the incident that happened in December 2018, they began to look into the possibility that the two cases were related. They've asked anyone with information about either or both cases to come forward. An organization outside of the local sheriff's office claims to have conducted interviews with those who say they provided Matthew with drugs around the time of his disappearance. However, they have been difficult to keep in contact with. In May 2019, the family enlisted the help of private investigators to try and move the case along. In June of that year, they also held a yard sale fundraiser at Tumwater High School in Tumwater, Washington to help raise money to continue their search. There have been reports that Matthew was seen in Yelm, Washington. However, these sightings have not been confirmed. As of 2020, leads in the investigation have begun to dry up. Despite this, the local sheriff's office has kept in close contact with the family. Sarah has shared it's been a daily struggle to keep believing her son is still alive, especially given the circumstances surrounding his disappearance. 1. Investigators have shared that Matthew may have suffered a medical emergency not long after he was last seen at the Speedway grocery store, given the delirious state he was in. There is also the possibility he could have been hurt when he ran into traffic, as there was dried blood around his mouth when he entered the store. However, as no evidence of Matthew has been found in the surrounding area, it's hard to say if this is the case. According to investigators, it's likely he was having a mental health crisis, which could have been spurred by the use of meth, ecstasy, or Ativan. This is said to be supported by the hallucinations he was having and his panicked behavior. However, it should be noted that it has yet to be proven that Matthew was under the influence of drugs at the time of his disappearance. 2. A second theory is that Matthew's disappearance is related to the assault he suffered in December 2018. Throughout the evening of February 28, he was ranting about people being after him, so it's believed by some that those he was talking about could be the individuals who attacked him a few months prior. Investigators have shared that they have yet to find evidence or receive information to show the two incidents are related. To help keep the case in the public eye, Sarah set up the Help Find Matthew Anfeldt Facebook page, which she updates regularly. She has also set up an online clothing store. Those wishing to support the family and raise awareness about the case can purchase clothing, from which 15% of proceeds go directly to the search effort. On February 28, 2020, Sarah held a candlelight vigil for Matthew, which was broadcast live on Facebook. She shares that listening to her son's music and watching his videos helps her get through each day. Matthew Anfeldt went missing from Grand Mound, Thurston County, Washington on February 28, 2019. He was 20 years old, and he was last seen wearing a black and gray Chicago Bulls sweatshirt with gray sweatpants. He was not wearing any shoes. At the time of his disappearance, he stood anywhere from 5'63" to 5'73" tall and weighed between 100 and 120 pounds. He has short, brown hair and hazel eyes, and he is said to have been clean-shaven. His ears are pierced, and he has the following tattoos: a cross with a double band in black ink around his right wrist, and a cross between his thumb and index finger on his left hand. Currently, his case is classified as endangered missing. If alive, he would be 21 years old. Those with information regarding the case are asked to contact the Thurston County Sheriff's Office at either 360-688-6696 or 360-786-5500.
Number 8.
The date Noah disappeared is currently unknown, but is believed to have occurred sometime in early March 2019. Most agencies give the date as March 6, 2019. In early March 2019, Noah's sister, then around 10 to 11 years of age, was staying with her paternal grandfather, Stephen McIntosh. She returned home on March 10. When Stephen dropped her off, Bryce informed him that Noah was missing, but refused to go to the police to file a missing persons report. This struck Stephen as unusual, especially when he recalled a phone call he'd had with his son on March 5, when Bryce said both he and Noah had been suffering from food poisoning. Around the same time, Bryce's sister tried to reach him via telephone, as he'd missed a family event. However, he wouldn't answer or return her calls. On March 12, 2019, Jillian, on the urging on Bryce's sister, contacted the Riverside County Department of Public Social Services, DPSS, and requested a welfare check on her son. She informed them that she hadn't seen him since she'd dropped him off at Bryce's apartment on March 4, and that Bryce had informed her on March 8 that Noah was missing, but that he would handle it. Officers were dispatched to check on the at-risk child, but found they were unable to contact Bryce in person or over the phone. As such, they made plans to return the next day. At 8 a.m. on March 13, the Corona Police Department's Special Response Team returned to Bryce's apartment to execute a search warrant on the unit and Bryce's vehicle. They brought with them the SWAT team, as they believed him to possibly be in possession of weapons and to be of an unknown mindset. This resulted in a standoff that lasted until Bryce finally exited the unit with his daughter. Noah was not present. During the execution of the search warrant on March 13, 2019, investigators seized numerous electronic devices, including Bryce's cell phone and computers. They also found handcuffs, zip ties, purple latex gloves and stained yellow towels. They also located the owner's manual for a Ninja brand blender, but could not locate the appliance in the apartment. While there, Bryce invoked his right to remain silent and requested an attorney. Upon receiving the electronic devices, the FBI conducted a thorough analysis of Bryce's online search history. On the computer, they found he'd searched, "What exactly is sulfuric acid? What does sulfuric acid do to aluminum? What kind of plastic can stand muriatic acid? Can you buy sulfuric acid? And clean shot drain opener sulfuric acid MSDS," while his cell phone showed searches for normal heart rate for 8-year-old. When they are running normal heart rate for 8-year-old, how exactly sodium hydroxide works and sodium hydroxide to water. That same day, Jillian and Bryce were arrested and later charged by the district attorney with willful child cruelty, to which they plead not guilty. They were held at the Robert Presley Detention Center. Neither had previous arrest records. While in custody, Jillian spoke with investigators and changed her initial story. She shared that she'd lied about the last time she'd seen Noah and said she'd actually saw him on March 2, 2019. From March 1 to 3, she had been staying with Bryce at his apartment. On March 2, Bryce had taken Noah into the bathroom, where Jillian recalled hearing her son ask why his father was hurting him. To her recollection, she never saw Noah leave the bathroom, and she left the apartment on March 3 after Bryce told her he needed to go to the local Home Depot. This admission would result in investigators later visiting the store and reviewing its surveillance footage. When Jillian's cell phone was taken as evidence, it was discovered she'd kept notes regarding the abuse Noah faced. Some of the documented examples include him being placed in hot water, him being placed in cold water for approximately 2.5 hours, him being placed in a bathtub filled with cold water for over 6 hours, and him being left in the bathroom with his feet tied up. At the beginning of the investigation, it was unclear if Jillian and Bryce were separated or divorced. It was later learned that the pair had never been married. On March 14, 2019, the DPSS reported Noah had been missing for more than a week and that his parents had been arrested for child abuse-related charges. They also stated that the household had been deemed unsafe. When investigators spoke with Noah's sister, while in the custody of Riverside County Child Protective Services, she said that she'd be aware Noah was missing because Bryce had told her so. She also shared that Noah's abuse often involved the use of the bathtub, cold water and handcuffs, and that she'd once helped Bryce hold Noah's legs below the water. When questioned by police, Noah's relatives said they hadn't seen him since early March 2019 and that they couldn't provide any information regarding his current whereabouts. They'd last seen him around the apartment complex. Local police teamed up with county, state and federal law enforcement agencies in their search for Noah. There were citizen volunteers who wished to get involved in the search, but they were told to hold off until their aid was requested. Areas of interest searched by investigators include Lee Lake and the surrounding hills near the 15 freeway, as well as the city of Murrieta and Tom's Farm, located near the 23,900 block of Temescal Canyon Road. They would not share why they had searched Lee Lake. Through the review of surveillance footage, investigators were able to confirm Bryce had purchased numerous items of interest in the days surrounding Noah's disappearance. They noted he'd purchased 2 long cuffed gloves, 243 bolt cutters, muriatic acid and one 128-ounce bottle of drain opener from a nearby Home Depot store, a 32-gallon Brute trash can, and a 32-ounce bottle of sulfuric acid drain opener at Lowe's Home Improvement, and 2 bottles of drain opener from Target. On March 4, 2019, data from Bryce's cell phone shows he made a trip to Squaw Mountain Road in Temescal Valley around 9:27 p.m. before heading to Target. A day later, his cell phone pinged on Wilson Valley Road in Aguanga, a remote and unincorporated area more than 50 miles east of his apartment, between 9:29 p.m. and 9:50 p.m. The resulting pings led investigators to search Aguanga on March 16, where, with the help of the K9 unit, they discovered a trash can matching the one purchased, with traces of human blood on the inside, homework with Noah M written on it, numerous purple latex gloves, a single blue long cuffed glove, parts of a Ninja brand blender, numerous blankets and yellow towels, a plastic bag with human blood residue, and empty drain cleaner bottles. When Squaw Mountain Road was searched, investigators found yet more items of interest, including one purple latex glove, a soiled yellow towel, used cleaning wipes and part of a wooden spoon. When police searched Bryce's vehicle, they found a purple latex glove, which matched the ones found at both the Aguanga and Squaw Mountain Road sites. On March 18, 2019, investigators were observed visiting the McIntosh apartment with agents from the FBI, a forensics team and a plumber. The plumber brought with him camera equipment and is said to have removed P-traps from the apartment's bathtubs, bathroom sinks and the kitchen sink. When he analyzed the P-traps, he found that the ones removed from the bathtubs appeared cleaner than the others, considering the age of the apartment. Along with searching the drains, investigators also looked through the unit's garage and were observed removing several boxes of evidence from the apartment. While they wouldn't give any indication of the items removed, observers noted they were wrapped in a blue tarp and appeared to be large and heavy. On March 20, 2019, a report was written, which noted that Bryce, or the caregiver as he's referred to in the report, was known to employ a type of discipline that was seen as inappropriate and excessive, and that the abuse risk level of the home had been high. It's currently unclear who wrote up the report or why it was created weeks after Noah was first reported missing. Bryce was charged with first-degree murder with a special circumstance of torture on March 28, 2019, a charge for which he could receive either a life sentence without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. Investigators shared that they'd found trace evidence, which left no doubt in their minds, that Noah had been the victim of a homicide, and while they couldn't publicly release details due to the ongoing nature of the investigation, they accused Bryce of trying to conceal evidence through the use of acid and other products. They believe Bryce's vehicle, a black BMW 330i with California license plates 5MKE807, was a key element in the murder, and thus asked anyone who may have seen it between March 4 and 5, 2019 to contact them. They also asked residents of Corona, Temescal Valley and Murrieta to call in if they recalled seeing either Jillian, Noah, or Bryce between the dates of February 20 and March 12, 2019. Given the charge, the case moved from a missing child investigation to a no-body homicide. In April 2019, Bryce pleaded not guilty to both the murder and child abuse charges. That same day, the DPSS received notification that they needed to complete a child fatality report for Noah, given his father had been charged with his murder. Toward the end of March 2019, the residents of Riverside County held a candlelight vigil for Noah and hung blue ribbons around the county, which symbolized awareness for child abuse. The vigil was held at Spyglass Park, and local community members and city officials were in attendance. As the investigation progressed, Noah's maternal grandfather spoke with the media and told them that a year before his grandson went missing he'd contacted Child Protective Services, fearing Noah was being abused by Bryce, something that was later confirmed to Douglas by Noah himself. He feels Bryce is responsible for the murder and had been concerned in the past about his terrible temper, as he is known to be a violent man. If given the chance, he shares that he and his wife would have taken back Noah in a heartbeat. Upon the request of news outlets, the juvenile court made the rare decision to release Noah's DPSS record upon coming to the conclusion he was most likely deceased. This meant that juvenile confidentiality laws no longer applied. This is something the attorney representing Noah and his sister opposed, as there was no proof the boy was dead. The information that was released showed a history of abuse that dated all the way back to 2013. According to the record, the DPSS began receiving reports that Noah was being abused in Orange County in 2013, as at the time his body showed numerous bruises, including an adult-sized handprint on his buttocks and a black eye. At the time, Noah is also said to have told social workers that Bryce spanked him in the stomach. Both Bryce and Jillian were investigated twice regarding these claims, but the cases were closed in October 2013 due to the reports being unfounded. In redacted Riverside County records, a social worker made passing reference to the 2013 abuse, saying Noah's black eye was the result of Bryce having thrown a wallet at his face. This was listed in the background check section of the first 2017 report, but it's not clear when or how the social worker received this information. The released records further stated that, since August 2017, social workers had received at least 10 reports that Bryce was abusing Noah and his sister and that Jillian was failing to protect her children. The first report noted that Noah had told a police officer and the responding social worker that Bryce had zip-tied his wrists and ankles, blindfolded him and dunked him into freezing cold water because he'd soiled his pants on accident. He also shared that he'd been handcuffed to the bathtub and forced to sit in cold water for hours at a time, and he recounted one incident where Bryce force-fed him laxatives and made him sit in his feces all day before having to clean it up himself. According to the report, Bryce admitted to this, but said he only did so in order to teach Noah how to properly use the toilet. Between August 17 and 24, 2017, the reporting party, whose name was redacted, called the Children's Services Division hotline again and was transferred to the voicemail of the social worker who first checked on Noah. It's believed this anonymous person was Douglas Godfrey. On August 24, a social worker and a police officer from the Corona Police Department attempted to make in-person contact with Bryce regarding the claim, but he refused to speak with them and told them he was unavailable. According to a report written about the interaction, Bryce denied being Noah's biological father and admitted to severely punishing the boy for his bathroom issues. On August 25, 2017, an officer with the Corona Police Department returned to the apartment to conduct a safety inspection, but was forced to leave after Bryce refused to open the door. 3 days later, the social worker completed a safety assessment where it was noted that the caregiver caused serious physical harm to the child, but that Noah was safe. The case would officially be closed on September 6, 2017, a day after the initial responding officer contacted the social worker to say the criminal investigation had been dropped. On November 9, 2017, another report of child abuse was called in after Bryce forced his son to attend school in just a diaper, shirt and shoes in an attempt to humiliate him for his toilet issues. When contacted by the school, Bryce said there were clothes in Noah's backpack, which included a pair of female red-pink shorts and a zip-up hoodie with butterflies on it, items which resulted in other students teasing the young boy. Hoping to quell the teasing, the school's principal went to Target and bought Noah new clothes. When asked why he'd sent Noah to school dressed in such a way, Bryce cited the toileting issues and shared that he felt his son was being lazy and that he no longer had a medical condition. The social worker who investigated the report noted that Jillian hadn't protected Noah and that the family as a whole needed to seek counseling, parenting classes or some other form of support. They also wrote that Bryce was punishing Noah in a way that was punitive and humiliating and opening the child up to ridicule. November of that year saw numerous other claims being reported, including calls on the 21, 22 and 28 of the month. Once again, law enforcement officials and social workers attempted to make contact with Noah's parents, but were unsuccessful. As a result, Riverside County closed its investigation into the family on December 17, 2017, citing the reason as the parents' refusal to cooperate. In February 2018, Noah once again spoke with a social worker at school, who is said to have also spoke with Bryce, if only briefly, after a report was called in regarding his and his sister's sleeping arrangements. An attempt was also made to contact Jillian in order to try and offer her housing, as she was living still in her car at the time, but to no avail. On February 15, the social worker reported that the household contained no children likely to be in immediate danger of serious harm, and no further claims were called in. At the end of the 18 months, starting in August 2017 and ending in March 2019, all but 2 of the reports were closed, with the reasons stated as unfounded or inconclusive, while some were left open with no final determination provided. The 2 allegations not closed were said to be substantiated in March 2019, just a week before Noah is said to have disappeared, but since the investigating social workers couldn't substantiate the allegations of abuse in person, Noah was unable to be removed from the home. In October 2019, a civil attorney by the name of Robert Booth filed a claim against Riverside County on behalf of Noah and his sister, alleging the county's Department of Public Social Services dropped the ball when they failed to take action in response to the numerous complaints regarding the abuse the pair faced. The claim said that the social workers' 5 staff members from the Children's Services Division had violated their duty to protect the 2 from abuse and that their civil rights had been violated as a result. As such, he was seeking an undisclosed amount of money in connection to Noah's disappearance and presumed death. The claim took 6 months to prepare and served as a notice to Riverside County that a suit would follow and gave the county an opportunity to settle or reject the claim altogether. The claim highlighted the mishandling of child abuse and neglect cases at the hands of the DPSS and showed that Noah's case was simply one of many high-profile cases handled by the department. On December 19, 2019, Jillian pleaded guilty to 2 counts of child endangerment while in attendance at a pre-trial hearing at the Riverside County Superior Court. The judge ordered the plea form sealed, meaning the terms of the agreement Jillian made with the prosecutor in exchange for her admission of guilty could not be made public. She will be sentenced on April 3, 2020. Bryce is currently awaiting trial. He is scheduled to attend a pre-trial hearing on March 20, 2020. Noah's body has yet to be found, but foul play is suspected in his disappearance due to the circumstances involved. It's unclear when he was killed, but investigators believe it occurred between March 3 and 4, 2019. A possible motive has been determined, but has not been revealed due to the active nature of the investigation, and police continue to look into the case. Noah's maternal grandparents held a memorial for him out of state for those within the family. They've shared that there will be no closure until his body is found. From March to April 2019, a local business called Cinnaholic sold the Noah cinnamon roll, which saw 10% of proceeds donated to the Joyful Hearts Foundation for Child Abuse Awareness. Noah Thomas McIntosh was last seen in Corona, California during the early days of March 2019. He was 8 years old, and what he was last seen wearing is currently unknown. At the time of his disappearance, he stood at 4'53" and weighed approximately 55 pounds. He has strawberry blonde hair and blue eyes. Currently, his case is classified as a no-body homicide. If alive, he would be 11 years old. Those with information regarding the case can contact the Corona Police Department at either 951-736-2330 or 951-279-3659. An official police tip line has also been set up at 951-817-5837.